Welcome back to the Pastors on Porn podcast, and we're looking at some of those issues that can take us out of ministry or keep us in ministry, and a lot of that has to do with this word called resilience. And in part one, we described resilience, and it's really way more of a robust term than is longevity. Resilience is all about how we deal with difficult situations. It's all about resistance training. And we were talking about the fact that every pastor is going to deal with storms and seasons in their life. You know, on the west coast of Vancouver Island up here in Canada, they have this super expensive 5-star restaurant hotel called Wickaninnish Inn, and is right on the west side of the west coast. And you know, they have this clever marketing strategy. In the middle of the winter, you can go and rent these super expensive rooms and sit inside and watch all the storms blowing in off the Pacific Ocean. And I'm not, forget the long walks on the beach. It's stormy weather, and again, clever marketing. But how many of us as pastors could identify with that, where we go, you know what? There's seasons of relative peace where the blue sky is out, but then there's seasons where it's like storms blow in off the ocean. And here's the key. What is it that gives you the resilience to weather those storms as opposed to taking you out? And last week I spoke about a couple ones. I said isolation, bar none, will take you out faster than anything else. If you're going to be resilient, you have got to have a friend that you are self-disclosing to, a counselor, 1 or 2 or 3 close people to you, a cadre of people that you're doing life with that trust you and you trust them. Without that, you are a sitting duck and will not be resilient and be able to weather those storms. And then we spoke about this whole idea of calling, and I used the example in my life where I had centered my call on the words of Jesus to Peter, where he says, "Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep, take care of my lambs." And it enabled me when I'm dealing with the thumbs up and thumbs down of people coming, people going, people saying this is the best place and no, this place sucks. All of that, scenario of turnover. How do you keep anchored and grounded? Well, you keep anchored and grounded knowing that you're doing this as an expression of your love and obedience and worship to God. So those are a couple opening thoughts around resilience. And let me go on and just give you a few more. First of all, this whole idea of emotions and knowing your emotions is absolutely central. To be resilient, you have got to be self-aware and know the season that you're in. I am in my 50s now. I don't know, in this season, and I am probably doing more work and trying to figure out my emotions more than any other time in my life. My wife, thinks I'm tremendously unself-aware or non-self-aware. I don't know what she's talking about, but apparently it's the case. And how are you doing? How are you feeling? And I'm just going, I don't know. There's an accountability group that I was in for about a year, and the leader of the group would have us describe our feelings. And we would all say, "Oh, okay. How you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing okay." And finally he got so exasperated with us. He said, "Gentlemen, okay is not a feeling." And as a result, we have this feeling wheel that we've been working on to try to, figure out our feelings. And well, the reason that's important is not just to become touchy-feely. The reason it's important is because emotional stability, emotional self-awareness is crucial for this whole area of resiliency. Listen to this description as it relates to resiliency and as it relates to emotions. Resilient people are aware of situations, their own emotional reactions, and the behaviors of those around them. In order to manage feelings, it is essential to understand what is causing them and why. And so, some of the books that I've been reading, I read a great book called Emotional Agility, Getting Unstuck, Embrace Change, and Thrive in Work and Life by Susan Davids. And she talks a lot about when you're in a situation and your emotions are starting to go off, become curious. Curiosity is a word she used a lot. Go, interestingly, right now I'm experiencing anger, or right now my heart is racing, or right now there's something going off inside of me, and becoming curious about your inner landscape. It's a great book for that, Susan David's book. Listened to a podcast recently. Kimberly Miller was talking. She's a graduate of Regent, and she has a podcast and a book around boundaries for the soul. And I've been starting to do some work to figure out what's going on using some of her descriptions. A podcast that I've been spending time with, Sight Shift by Chris McAllister. He's speaking about core fears, the things that trigger us, keep us from growing and moving forward at an emotional level, and or the things that keep ourselves stunted. And you say, why are you spending time talking about that? Well, here's what I'm realizing. I'm reacting to situations based on my emotions, but because I don't have a handle on what's going on, I'm not well positioned to learn from them and grow through them when the next situation hits. And there's nothing worse than going through a situation and learning nothing from it. And I want to learn about it. And part of it is learning how certain situations set me off or cause me to respond certain ways. I mean, it's absolutely crucial when you're looking at unwanted sexual behaviors or ways that you've coped or medicated yourself. If you don't understand your emotions, you really are behind the eight ball, for example. But it goes beyond that. It also has to do with resilience and dealing with the challenges and the pressures of ministry. Now, let me give you an example from a current place in our church right now and the life of me and my wife. We're in the process of transitioning our lead pastor role, not this fall, but next fall. That's about a year and a half away. And in a year and a half, we have a new young couple who is going to be taking over our role, and we're going to be moving sideways. I'm going to be doing more mentoring. I'll still be speaking, but they'll be taking over more of the upfront leadership roles. And one of the things that people are saying to me is, Vern, you've got to get really good at understanding what the process that you're going to go through in that transition, if it's going to be successful. One of the things Chris McAllister said in one of his podcasts around core fears, and I think this was the very first one on his list, the core fear that if I'm no longer needed in the same way, then I'm no longer loved. Can you imagine if you don't get that and you are responding or reacting to that, you don't recognize, I'm interpreting the fact that people aren't looking to me in the same way as I'm no longer loved or I'm no longer valued as a person. And if I don't get a handle of that and lean into that, then I could sabotage the needed transition in our church. I was joking with our elders team when we were talking transition. I said, we're going to go away for 4 or 5 months or whatever when we hand over the church to this new couple for them to, people be able to attach to them. But I was joking that I'm going to come back on my first Sunday and there's going to be a new person at the door. And they're going to look at me and they're going to say, "Are you new here?" And inside of me, I'm going to have this thought, what do you mean new here? I freaking planted this church. That's the feelings that are going to go off in me. And so I got to really wrestle with that and get a handle on that if I'm going to be resilient and set myself up well for the transition we're going to be going through as a church. That's just one example of how emotions play a big role in our decisions. The whole idea of character is talked about a lot. So let's just talk about that briefly. Carrie Nieuwhof says you should spend twice as much time working on your character as you do on your competence. I think that's a great quote. But here's the thing. You don't have to take a course on character. Trust me, the course comes to you. It's home delivery. And it's really how you respond to these seasons that blow in. You are going to have adversity, and character simply comes from learning to make the right choices. We're going to make bad choices, but when we start making the right ones and build on them, then we find that our character begins to grow. I know you all have on your fridge that verse about, when your faith is tested and all the things that works into your life, that verse out of James. But it's true. That's how character grows. I've been trying to dig some stumps out of our back lawn with, it's driving me nuts, these big stumps, and I'm trying to cut all of the supporting roots out with a shovel and a pickaxe. But that's a negative thing for me right now. But character is something that sends all these shoots out that ground us deep in with the love of God and proper responses. And so character is something that comes from making the right choices when those storms are presented to us in our life. And I really, sometimes look, I have 3 kids right now who are in their 20s, and I look at them and see how their resiliency grows. All of them have had different challenges in their life, and they've all left home now. We've managed to, have them leave home without, stopping the cheese flow kind of thing, feeding them cheese. But they've all, learned different things around resiliency. One of them struggled in terms of getting his license, but he overcame that, and then was getting a job, but now he's got some core confidence. He's dealt with some of these adversities, and I see in his growth of his character, there's core resilience being developed in his life. And the last thing is, it leads us to is just this idea of perseverance and faithfulness. You can't get very far into the idea of resilience without bumping into the whole concept of faithfulness or perseverance. We all know that Jesus said that you can't live a fruitful life if you don't exhibit perseverance. Luke 8 says, the seed on good soil stands for those with a noble and good heart who hear the word, retain it, and by persevering produce a crop. It's just part of what I think we all want. We all want to be known as faithful people. Of course, in the scriptures, the end of our life, we all want to hear from God, well done, good and faithful servant. I mean, that, if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably because you didn't lead your life perfectly. You've had a lot of missteps. You've had 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I certainly have. But at the end of the day, I hope it's true that I have accomplished God's purpose for my life in my generation. It says in Acts 13, it says, now when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. And as I look back at the life of my ministry and my wife's ministry and the time that we've been in ministry now, like I say, going on 27 years, it really has not been about our faithfulness nearly as much as it's been about God's faithfulness. It's not been about our ability to hold on to Him as it has been His ability to hold on to us. And that, I think, is the greatest testimony, not that we've done it right or perfectly, but God's faithfulness that we've managed to lean into and grab hold of in this journey. So I'm hoping something along these, out of these 2 podcasts, will enable you to grab onto resiliency in a greater way, because I think we need resilient pastors. We need people who go through life's ups and downs, still say good things about God and good things about other people, aren't jaded, aren't miserable, aren't despondent, but at the end of their life they can go, you know what, I'm glad for this, and I really wish I had done, this is the best thing I've ever done. And I look at my life and go, I would not choose any other choices than I have made in terms of this pastoral journey. I would have done some things differently that you all know about, but in terms of saying yes to God and yes to His call to be a pastor in this role, I would do it again in a heartbeat, even knowing everything that I would go through. So God's blessing to you. I would love to hear from you. Again, email is bandofbrothers@shaw.ca. You can also visit us on our website at bandofbrothers.care. And on that website, you can also get access to a 1-year course that's called a Traction Course, a winter driving guide to a first year of complete freedom from unwanted sexual behaviors. And I've been in the process. I'm doing a Zoom group right now with some key men, and we're going through, each week we go through material, and we're doing a Zoom group because they're in different parts of the country and the continent. And we're walking through what does it look like to gain the first year of traction in becoming the people that God wants us to be and the pastors that God wants us to be. So God bless you in your journey, and here's to perseverance, and here's to resilience.